Dr. Darren Hackman sat in his office, the soft hum of fluorescent lights above barely registering in his consciousness. His head was bowed over a patient file, brow furrowed in deep thought. The scribbled notes and test results blurred slightly as fatigue pulled at him, but his mind was still sharp, calculating the best surgical route for a high-risk heart procedure scheduled for the morning. The moment was shattered by the sharp buzz of the emergency line. "Dr. Hackman, we've got a trauma incoming. Multiple internal injuries. We're sending her straight to OR 2, no time for full imaging." He was already moving before the nurse finished. Darren's instincts kicked in, his long coat flaring behind him, his steps echoing down the hospital corridor like a drumbeat of purpose. He thrived in chaos, his calm a steady anchor in the whirlwind of life or death calls. But nothing could have prepared him for what waited on the operating table. Blood smeared her temple. Her lip was split. Her body lay still beneath a tangle of wires and monitors. Time stilled. Darren's breath caught. "Lena," he whispered, barely audible through his mask. The years fell away like paper in the rain. The late-night conversations in college libraries, the smile she had when quoting poetry, the goodbye they never really said. "Scalpel," he barked, regaining composure. His hands were steady, but his heart pounded with a panic he hadn't felt since his first surgery. This wasn't just another trauma patient. It was her, the girl who once held his heart, and now her life was in his hands. Darren stood at the observation window of the ICU, arms folded tightly across his chest as he watched the steady rhythm of the heart monitor beside her bed. Tubes, wires, machines, all working to keep Lena alive. Lena. The name reverberated through him like a long-forgotten melody. 2 nights had passed since the emergency surgery. He'd repaired the internal bleeding, stabilized her collapsed lung, and monitored every shift in her vitals with obsessive precision. Yet outside the operating room, he wrestled with emotions he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. His mind drifted back to the library corner where they'd first met. Lena, cross-legged on the floor, buried in books of philosophy and literature, always offering him quiet wisdom wrapped in humor. Their study nights turned into shared dinners, their conversations slipping effortlessly into the early hours of morning. They'd been inseparable, but never quite lovers. Just friends, close enough to ache, but too aware of diverging dreams. He chose med school. She chose poetry and passion. A sudden beeping broke the silence. Her eyelids fluttered. Darren rushed to her side, heart hammering. "Lena," he whispered, gripping her hand. Her lips moved slowly. Her eyes met his through a haze of pain. "Darren?" she rasped. And just like that, the past wasn't so far away. The morning sun filtered weakly through the hospital window, casting soft shadows across Lena's bruised face. Her color was returning slowly, but her eyes still held the weight of something far heavier than her injuries. Darren sat in the corner of the room, reviewing her latest labs, pretending to focus, but his eyes kept drifting back to her. She turned her head slightly. "You don't have to hover, Dr. Hackman," she teased weakly, voice raspy but laced with dry humor. He smirked. "Old habits. Besides, I always take a personal interest in patients who once corrected my grammar in biology class." She chuckled faintly, then winced. The bruised rib still made every movement a battle. "I remember that. You were hopeless with commas. And you were obsessed with poetry and the Oxford comma," he replied, his tone softening. "But that's not why I'm here." Silence settled between them again. Outside the room, nurses moved through the corridor, unaware of the emotional undertow inside. After a moment, Lena's gaze drifted to the window. "Darren, I need to tell you something. The accident." She paused, licking her lips. "I don't think it was an accident." He straightened. "What do you mean?" She looked at him then, her eyes pleading for belief. "I was driving back from my lawyer's office. It was dark, but I swear someone was following me. Then a car swerved out of nowhere and clipped my rear bumper. I spun out. Next thing I remember is you leaning over me." Darren's brows furrowed. "Have you told the police?" She nodded. "They said it was just a bad wreck, No skid marks, no evidence, just a tired single mother not paying attention. And you think? I know someone wanted me off the road, she interrupted, a flicker of fire in her tone. My ex-husband, Gratian, he wouldn't stop at anything. He's fighting for full custody of Noah, and he's furious that the court didn't grant it immediately. Darren took a breath, the name unfamiliar but already distasteful. Does he have a reason to hurt you like that? She gave a bitter laugh. Grayson doesn't get mad like most people. He gets strategic. His family owns half the city's development firms, has judges and politicians on speed dial. Everyone sees him as this refined, philanthropic businessman. But behind closed doors, her voice cracked. He's a different man. Cold, controlling. I left when I realized what he was capable of. Darren moved closer, his chair scraping quietly across the tile. And I don't know who I can trust anymore. Everyone thinks I'm overreacting, emotional, weak. You're none of those things, Darren said firmly. You've survived what most people would collapse under. And you don't have to do this alone. She looked at him, tears glossing her lashes. And what about Noah? He asked gently. She smiled through the ache. He's everything, Darren. I'd give my life for him. I just don't know if I'll be around long enough to protect him. Darren swallowed hard, the weight of her words settling deep. He didn't say it yet, but something inside him had already shifted. He wasn't going to let anything happen to Lena, or her son. Lena had barely been home a full 3 weeks before the world tipped sideways again. She had just finished preparing dinner. Noah was curled up on the living room rug with his sketch pad when she stepped outside to retrieve something from her car. The night air was cool and quiet, the neighborhood still, almost peaceful. But as she reached for the driver's side door handle, something caught her eye. The rubber lining around the door had been cut. Her breath hitched. She yanked it open and saw the wires dangling beneath the dash, frayed, exposed, tampered with. Her vision blurred. Her legs weakened. Someone had tried to disable, or worse, sabotage, her vehicle again. She ran back inside, hands trembling, and locked the door behind her. Noah looked up startled. She grabbed her phone with fumbling fingers and dialed. Hello? Darren answered immediately, his voice alert. Darren, her voice cracked. It happened again. The car. Someone messed with it. I'm on my way, he said without hesitation. Pack a bag for you and Noah. You're not staying there another night. Less than 30 minutes later, Darren stood in her doorway, tension in his jaw and worry in his eyes. You're coming with me, he said simply. They rode, not saying much. Darren didn't want to push. The elevator doors opened to Darren's penthouse suite, sleek, minimalist, and flooded with warm lighting. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed the city skyline like a glittering fortress beyond the glass. It's a little over the top, Darren admitted, rubbing the back of his neck. But it's safe. Building security is tight, and I have private surveillance around the perimeter. Lena nodded, still holding Noah's small hand in hers. Her son had gone quiet again, his eyes wide as he took in the unfamiliar space. Hi, Noah, Darren said gently, crouching down. I've heard a lot about you. Noah glanced at his mother before offering a tentative nod. You like pancakes? Darren asked with a small smile. Because I make a mean chocolate chip stack. At earned the faintest smile from Noah. Over the next few days, the shift was subtle but meaningful. Noah followed Darren with cautious curiosity, watching him cook, helping water the balcony plants, sitting nearby when Darren read on the couch. He didn't say much, but he stayed close. Lena watched the bond unfold with a quiet ache in her chest. She was still afraid. But for the first time in a long while, she wasn't facing it alone. The sleek office of Grayson Bradford echoed with the slam of a crystal tumbler against polished wood. Whiskey sloshed violently inside as he paced behind his mahogany desk, jaw clenched, eyes burning with rage. She's embarrassed me, he growled, voice rising. Publicly, legally. And now she thinks she can just walk away with my son? His attorney, Victor Long, shifted uncomfortably in the chair across from him. You understand the optics aren't exactly favorable. Lena has no criminal record. She's the primary caregiver, and the court has already shown leniency toward shared custody. I don't want shared custody, Grayson snapped. I want full custody, permanently. Long took a breath, trying to remain calm. She survived a near-fatal crash. If we try to use that against her, it could backfire. Family courts are tricky, Grayson. Judges tend to favor the mother unless there's overwhelming evidence. Then find some, Grayson roared, slamming his palm on the desk. Find out where she is, who she's with. I want every detail, every move, now. Long hesitated. You need to tread carefully. Surveillance, coercion, any of that gets exposed, it'll destroy our case. Grayson's voice dropped into a chilling calm. We have other options, Victor. Victor stiffened but said nothing more. He'd worked with the Bradfords long enough to know when not to ask questions. Across the city, Darren sat in the hospital's administrative conference room, reviewing budget reports when a name on the donor plaque caught his eye. The Bradford Foundation, Platinum Legacy Donor. He stared at it, pulse quickening. Later that evening, he did a deeper search into hospital board connections and discovered just how deep the Bradford roots ran. Legal advisors, hospital committee contributors, and alumni trustees. Grayson's reach wasn't just social. It was systemic. When he returned to his penthouse, Lena noticed the tension in his shoulders. What is it? She asked, setting her tea aside. He hesitated. Grayson's family, they're major donors here. Legal, medical, academic, he's connected in places that matter. Places that can bend the rules without breaking them. Lena's expression darkened. He used to brag about that. How money keeps people loyal and quiet. Well, Darren said, folding his arms, I'm not one of those people. He might own boardrooms, but he doesn't get to own you or Noah. She gave him a soft, weary smile, but behind it was fear Darren couldn't ignore. And now that he truly understood the scale of the fight ahead, he made a silent vow. He would not let Grayson win. Detective Leela Vance had seen her fair share of powerful families who thought the law bent to their will. But the Bradfords were in a league of their own. From campaign donations to hospital wings, their fingerprints were everywhere in the city. Still, something about Lena Bradford's crash didn't sit right. Vance sat in her precinct office, flipping through the accident report for the 5th time. Photos showed no skid marks, no signs of evasive action. The position of the vehicle didn't match the supposed trajectory. Witness statements were conveniently vague or missing entirely. She circled the final note again. No traffic camera footage available, due to scheduled maintenance. Too convenient. She reached for her phone and made a note to contact a private analyst, someone not tied to the city's infrastructure. If Grayson Bradford had tampered with evidence, she'd find it. Back at Darren's penthouse, Lena sat alone on the balcony, staring out at the city skyline. Guilt twisted in her gut. Darren had risked his reputation, his safety, and his peace for her. And now, with Grayson pulling strings from every angle, the threat was growing darker. She couldn't let Darren get caught in the crossfire. The next morning, while Darren was at the hospital, Lena returned briefly to her old home, now under limited access thanks to the court order. She needed Noah's favorite toy, she told the officer standing by. But what she really needed was something else. Something she hadn't touched in a while, the panic room. Hidden behind a false wall in the master closet, the panic room was something Grayson had insisted on during renovations. For emergencies, he'd said. But Lena had used it for her own quiet purpose, as a secret stash for backup records. Old files, copies of financial statements Grayson had told her to shred. But she didn't, something told her not to. It took effort, but she found it. A leather folder tucked behind a stack of defunct tech. Inside were documents she'd almost forgotten about, paper trails leading to off-the-book donations, shell accounts, medical reports altered after surgeries, names she recognized from Grayson's elite circle, even a memo suggesting hush payments to cover up a failed clinical trial linked to a Bradford-backed research fund. Her hands shook. This wasn't just about her marriage. This was about lives destroyed for profit. And now, Someone was trying to silence her for good, her heart racing. She couldn't run anymore. She had to fight. And this folder might be the key. The city lights glittered below as Darren and Lena sat on the balcony, wrapped in quiet conversation and soft laughter. A warm breeze carried the scent of jasmine from a planter nearby. Lena, wrapped in one of Darren's oversized hoodies, leaned back in her chair, a rare look of ease on her face. "It's strange," she said, looking out at the horizon. "Being here, feeling safe again. I didn't think that was possible anymore." Darren looked at her, his gaze steady. "You always made me feel like that in college. Safe. Real. Like I didn't have to be perfect all the time." She smiled gently, eyes searching his. "You were always so focused. I thought I was just a passing thought back then." He shook his head slowly. "You were never just a thought, Lena. I loved you. I think I still do. Maybe I never stopped." The confession hung between them, delicate and raw. Her eyes shimmered as his hand found hers. "Darren," she whispered, voice catching in her throat. He leaned in, slowly, cautiously, until their lips met, soft and aching, a kiss years in the making. Her hand slid to his cheek, holding him there, grounding them in the present. Then crash. Glass shattered from the back entrance. Darren jumped to his feet, instincts flaring. Lena gasped, heart racing. "Noah," she whispered. Darren was already moving, grabbing the metal baton from beneath the coffee table as Lena rushed to the hallway. The security system blared as lights flickered on. They reached Noah's room. He was still asleep, undisturbed. But Darren knew this was no coincidence. They weren't safe, not anymore. The morning after the break-in, Darren wasted no time. He filed a detailed report with the police, but his gut told him it wouldn't be enough. Not with the Bradfords pulling strings behind the scenes. As he watched Lena cling protectively to Noah in the hospital lobby, Darren made a decision. One he knew couldn't be undone. By midday, a private security firm was in place, vetted by a trusted contact from his residency days. 2 guards rotated shifts at the penthouse, surveillance was enhanced, and a discreet panic protocol was created specifically for Lena and Noah. "Thank you," Lena said quietly as she watched one of the guards install an internal panic button near the kitchen. "But I didn't want this for you. You shouldn't have to live like this." Darren reached for her hand. "You don't have to protect me, Lena. I chose to be part of this. I'm not walking away." 2 weeks later, they faced the courtroom. The atmosphere was sharp with tension. As Lena sat beside her lawyer, posture upright, but hands clenched in her lap. Darren sat behind her. Eyes steady, jaw tight. Grayson entered like a man used to winning. Tailored suit, confident smirk, and a team of legal bulldogs. His charm barely masked the venom beneath. Lena's attorney stood. "We'd like to call Dr. Darren Hackman to the stand." Gasps fluttered through the courtroom gallery. A respected surgical name. A public figure now entangled in a very private war. As Darren took the stand, the judge raised an eyebrow. "Dr. Hackman, you understand that testifying here may bring professional scrutiny." "I do, Your Honor," Darren said without hesitation. "But protecting Lena and her son is more important than my reputation." He detailed her injuries, the trauma she endured, the break-in, the fear Lena lived with every day. His voice never shook. His testimony painted Lena not as unstable, but as a survivor fighting to protect her child. Then it was Grayson's turn. His lead attorney stood, sharp as a blade. "Hackman, are you romantically involved with Miss Bradford?" Darren didn't flinch. "Yes. So your testimony could be influenced by personal feelings?" "My feelings don't change the facts," Darren replied calmly. "Were you ever arrested in college, suspended, disciplined by your medical board?" "No," Darren said, meeting the lawyer's eyes. "My record is clean. You're welcome to check. But I'm sure you have already done that." The lawyer flipped through papers, frustration creeping in. No further questions. Grayson's jaw tightened. Outside the courtroom, Darren caught Lena's eye. She blinked back tears as she mouthed, "Thank you." He gave her the smallest of nods. Grayson had tried to ruin her, had tried to shake Darren. But truth, real unshakable truth, was on their side. And for the first time in a long while, Lena had hope. It happened so fast. One moment, Lena was laughing with Noah in the penthouse kitchen, helping him decorate cookies. The next, flashing red and blue lights poured through the windows as pounding fists rattled the front door. "Lena Bradford," an officer called. "You're under arrest for possession of a controlled substance." Darren rushed from the hallway, stunned as two officers pushed past his security guard and placed Lena in handcuffs. Noah screamed as one officer pulled Lena away from him. "Mommy, what are you talking about?" Darren demanded. "There's nothing here, nothing illegal." But then an officer emerged from Darren's home office with a small plastic bag filled with pills. "We found these hidden in a drawer," he announced. Lena's face drained of color. "Those aren't mine," she whispered. Darren knew it. He hadn't seen those pills before either. Something about the timing was too precise, too convenient, especially after their recent court victory. At the station, Lena was processed like any other suspect. Mugshots, fingerprints, cold, impersonal questions. Hours passed before Darren arrived with his attorney, fury radiating from him. "This is a setup," he told the arresting officer. "You're being played." He didn't stop there. Within hours, Darren leveraged every connection he had. Colleagues, judges, former patients who owed him favors. He paid the bail, secured a top defense attorney, and got her out by sunrise. But the damage was done. By noon, Lena received a notice from the court. Emergency change in custody, granted to Grayson Bradford. Her knees buckled as she read the words. Darren caught her before she hit the ground. "I've lost him," she sobbed. "He got what he wanted." "No," Darren said, holding her tightly. "He played a dirty hand. We're not folding." Meanwhile, Detective Vance reviewed the arrest report and surveillance footage with a critical eye. The timing was off. The tip about the drugs had come anonymously, and the evidence had conveniently shown up in a locked drawer. She leaned back in her chair, frowning. Too clean. Too rehearsed. She pulled up her files on Grayson Bradford and his legal team. There were whispers, sealed reports, rumors of tampering. None of it proven. But now? Now she had something to work with. And this time, she wasn't backing down. Detective Vance waited outside Darren's penthouse, her hands tucked into the pockets of her leather jacket. Lena stepped out onto the balcony to breathe in the cool night air, while she waited for Detective Vance to be escorted by one of the private guards. "Detective Vance," Lena asked, heart thudding. "Thank you for seeing me, I believe you," Vance said without hesitation, her eyes steady. "About the drugs, about the crash. I've been digging, and the deeper I go, the more I see red flags. But if we want to get this past the reach of the Bradfords, we can't take it to the local precinct. We need something solid, something the FBI can't ignore." Lena nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. "I have old files, medical cover-ups, falsified clinical reports, but they're incomplete. Grayson didn't just operate alone. I think there were doctors, hospital board members, maybe even pharmaceutical reps involved. I kept them hidden for years. I didn't know what to do with them." "Then we do it together," Vance said. "But we have to make them move. Make someone panic enough to reveal themselves." That night, Darren and Lena sat at the dining table with the documents spread out like a puzzle. Darren tapped his pen against the edge of a forged memo they'd created. A fake document, suggesting an anonymous whistleblower was planning to deliver a copy of the files to the media. "If we circulate this rumor quietly," Darren said, "and leak it in just the right places, someone will take the bait." Sure enough, within 48 hours, someone did. Darren noticed unusual activity on his hospital email. Someone attempting to access his personal patient notes. Then a message arrived in an encrypted channel, warning him to back off or face career-ending consequences. He wasn't surprised. But what did surprise him was the trace left behind. With the help of a tech specialist Vance trusted, they tracked the intrusion back to a hospital administrator, Dr. Myron Hensley, chief of operations and a longtime board member. And more importantly, a close friend of Grayson's father. Darren's blood went cold as the pieces fell into place. "He's the one who vouched for Grayson's family during the donation campaign," Darren muttered, voice tight with rage. "He's been helping them cover this up for years." Vance nodded grimly. "We have enough now. I'm sending this to a federal contact tonight. If this sticks, and it should, it'll blow the whole thing wide open. Lena covered her mouth, her eyes wide. We're really doing this. Darren squeezed her hand. We are, and this time, they won't see it coming. Because this wasn't just a fight for custody anymore. It was a fight to expose a corrupt empire. One that had hurt too many people for far too long. Grayson Bradford's world began to unravel the moment the documents went public. The story hit the news like wildfire. Medical malpractice cover-up linked to prominent family and hospital board, with screenshots of falsified clinical reports, altered patient outcomes, and shadow donations to silence whistleblowers. Lena's name wasn't mentioned directly, but insiders knew where it all pointed. Grayson read the article in his penthouse, the newspaper trembling in his hands. He tossed it across the room, shattering a glass in the process. How dare she, he hissed. His phone rang non-stop. Lawyers, board members, journalists, and even family members demanding answers. He ignored most of them. When he finally answered, it was his father's voice, low and strained. Tell me this isn't true, Grayson. I had it under control, he snapped. No, you didn't. You exposed us all because you couldn't keep your temper under control. You were supposed to keep this quiet. Was she worth it? Grayson hung up and hurled the phone across the room. Lena quickly filed for reinstatement of her custody rights. She sat in the quiet courtroom, fingers trembling as the judge read the decision. Based on new evidence and the failure to comply with court orders, sole custody of Noah Bradford is granted to Lena Bradford. All supervised visitation privileges for Mr. Grayson Bradford are suspended until further notice. Tears welled in Lena's eyes. Darren squeezed her hand. Noah, seated behind them with a guardian, looked up with wide eyes and whispered, Mommy? Lena turned and pulled him into her arms. We're going home, she whispered, and no one is taking you from me again. While Lena and Noah embraced freedom, Grayson found himself under siege. Reporters camped outside his company's headquarters, demanding answers. The media frenzy grew worse by the day as more whistleblowers emerged. Emboldened by Lena's documents, behind closed doors, the board of Bradford Global convened. Shareholders were furious. Stock prices were dipping. Their polished image, years in the making, was stained beyond repair. Grayson stormed into the boardroom uninvited during a confidential session. If any of you vote me out, I will destroy you, he barked, eyes blazing. And if any investor pulls out, I'll tie them up in court until their children have grandchildren. A deadly silence followed. Then one board member stood. It's too late, Grayson. The lawsuits have started. 2 former patients had filed a class action suit against the company, citing medical negligence directly linked to documents from Lena's folder. A judge approved a temporary freeze on Grayson's personal assets linked to Bradford Global until the case was resolved. His empire, once untouchable, was collapsing. Grayson left the room shaking with rage. No more lawyers could clean this up. No more influence could protect him. And somewhere deep down, he knew. He hadn't just lost his son. He was losing everything. Lena smoothed her red dress as she stepped into Cascada, the upscale restaurant that had once been Grayson's favorite playground for power lunches and whispered deals. The same place where he once paraded her on his arm as a trophy. Tonight, the tables had turned, and Lena was ready. On her arm now stood Dr. Darren Hackman, steady, calm, and radiating quiet strength in a tailored charcoal suit. Heads turned as they entered, their presence impossible to ignore. The maitre d', startled at first, quickly offered them a prime table near the center of the room. Lena sat with grace, her eyes scanning the room. It didn't take long. Grayson was there, 2 tables away, dining alone, a half-empty glass of scotch in hand. The moment he saw them, his smile vanished before quickly morphing into a sneer masked by fake charm. He rose and made his way over. Well, he said, voice sugary sweet. Didn't take you long to trade up, Lena. Or is this some sort of victory parade? Lena met his gaze coolly. No parade, just dinner, but thank you for noticing. Grayson leaned in slightly, his smile tightening. His voice dropped to a hiss only they could hear. You think this is over? You humiliated me, exposed my family, took my son, but I'll clear my name. And you, He stared directly into Lena's eyes. "You'll regret everything." He straightened and added, almost casually, "I did hire someone to drive you off the road. And next time, you won't survive it." Darren calmly placed his phone on the table, screen glowing. "That's all I needed." Grayson's eyes widened in realization. Rage overtook him in a flash. "You smug little—" Before anyone could react, he lunged across the table, knocking over glasses and plates as he grabbed Darren by the collar. "I will kill you," Grayson screamed. "I did it before, I'll do it again." The restaurant froze. Gasps echoed. Several patrons had their phones pulled out. Darren shoved him back, just as two figures rose from a nearby table. FBI agents, who had been quietly waiting, watching, and recording. "Grayson Bradford, you are under arrest for attempted murder, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice," one agent said firmly. Grayson struggled as they cuffed him. "You set me up." "No," Lena said, rising to her feet beside Darren. "You set yourself up. And this time, there would be no escaping justice." 2 years later, the world looked very different for Lena Bradford. Her days were no longer clouded by fear or legal battles, but filled with purpose and healing. As the founder and director of the Storyhouse Foundation, Lena spent her time building literacy programs for underserved communities, using books and words to give others the strength she once had to fight for herself and her son. Darren, having stepped back from the grueling pace of full-time surgery, now taught part-time at the local medical school. He was beloved by his students, not just for his brilliance, but for his sincerity. He often told them, "Medicine saves lives, but never forget the person behind the chart." Their engagement had been quiet, private, just how they wanted it. Darren had proposed on the same hospital rooftop where they first spoke after her accident. Just the two of them, with the city lights flickering in approval. Noah, now 8, was a different boy. Therapy and time had gently unraveled the anxiety that once haunted him. He laughed easily now, played freely, and no longer flinched when someone raised their voice. The night he crawled into Darren's lap during movie night and whispered, "Dad, can you make popcorn?" Lena had quietly stepped out of the room and wept tears of joy. On Sunday afternoons, they often walked together through the neighborhood park, Lena, Darren, and Noah, hand in hand, a true unit. As Noah raced ahead toward the swings, Lena leaned into Darren's side. "We're really here, aren't we?" she whispered. He smiled, kissing her forehead. "We made it." Behind them was a storm. Ahead of them was peace. And together, they were finally home. The end. Hope you enjoyed this story by Green Tea Tales. Help our channel to grow with like, share, and subscribe.